Walking down the hill into the dead city, I felt a sense of uselessness in what I was doing, almost self-indulgent, as if I was giving up by returning, for there was nothing to be done. Maybe I wanted to be found. Hadn't I always wanted to be found? Alone on the streets at night, people throwing used lighted cigarettes at me or drenching me in wine whilst I slept. But they had no knowledge of why I had taken the life as a tramp. Maybe it didn't really matter. It certainly didn't now. It's strange how one is sometimes made to question one's life. We live it second by second, day by day, and then suddenly we stop and look all around us to ascertain our location and situation. Long ago I had pondered over the meaning of life. Long ago I had a family and a wife. Then it happened. Those long dark nights of the soul, times I chose not to remember, and yet now, as I walk back into this dead city, they come flooding back to my mind, and yet I still choose to forget. Sometimes certain memories are too painful to remember. They have no benefit to man, and yet for that reason they seem to linger in the back of the head, waiting for them to be addressed. But now was not the time. Down back on the street so familiar, I began to see again my world. The fog seemed slightly lighter. Maybe it was dissipating, maybe it was just the light of day that was breaking through. Soon I gathered people from surrounding cities would come to its rescue, but as ever, it would be much too late. Whatever carnage had taken place was long ago, and nothing and no one could undo those things. I walked through familiar roads, streets, the pavements, past shops left empty and open. Inside I gathered some tins and put them in a bag. I didn't take too much, as I knew these shops were full and their location was known to me like the back of my hand, and whenever I felt next hungry, I would visit there. I got inside a red bus. The keys were still inside, the engine was still warm. It had been running ever since whatever happened. I put it in gear and closed the doors, and began to drive the route I had often taken. I passed the deserted roads. Some house doors I noticed were open, some lights on the bedrooms. I thought when I had finished my drive about the city, I would investigate them one by one, on the off chance of finding others like myself, or perhaps to get items I might need, or to rest in the warm. How strange I thought that would be, me, a tramp, alone in the cold nights, able to choose any abode to sleep now that this city had met its terrible end. I drove past, through a narrow road that led to a patch of green grass. I stopped the bus for a while, took out the key, and gave the engine so much needed rest. I opened the double doors and walked out the exit. Funny how routine remains, even when there is no need for such formality. Outside the wind blew a small breeze, and the autumn trees lost their leaves. They seemed the only living thing in this city now. How funny, like the canvas, the scenery almost remains the same, just the people change. I sat on the grass for a while and slept. I woke maybe a few hours later. It was still very bright. But it was not the sun that had awoken me. It was a faint noise of laughter I could hear. Where was it coming, I mused. I got up and brushed the leaves and grass of my grubby trousers and pulled together the robe that had held my jacket across my waist. I followed as best I could the sound of the laughter, and behind some trees, in a somewhat darkened area, I could smell that of burning wood. And indeed, there met in front of my eyes a fire burning in the middle of the ground, and around the embers were 3 such vagrants as me. I wandered up to them and sat by them. They didn't say a word. Leaning over nearer, I could tell why their breath smelled of liquor and meths. On the floor beside one of them was a needle. I tried to speak to them, but they would just laugh aimlessly. I tried to shake one of them to get some sense out of him, but they would not react. Later on, as night crept in, I found a quiet spot under a tree, as, with the leaves right above me, I fell to sleep whilst the other tramps continued their merriment. My sleep was very much disturbed, but strangely, I never seemed to awake from it. I had the strangest of dreams. They seemed unclear, but were filled with violent colours and sharp shapes. There was no clarity to it, whatever I was seeing. I knew, though, that whatever it was a kind of mental translation of whatever had happened to my city. What I could not gauge is how long this process of disaster had taken. Was it merely one night that I had slept, or had I slept longer? Had I been made to sleep? Why was I and these other vagrants the only people alive in this city? Why this city? What did it all mean? I felt my mind was asking the questions that needed answers, and I felt I was on the verge of something, when all of a sudden I was brought out of my dreams, and my eyes shot open to see the hands of my friendly tramps wrapped around my neck. The other two smiled and grinned, armed with two very sharp knives. I tried to pull myself away from the first, and shouted and pushed, but it was to no avail. It was then I noticed for the first time his eyes. They appeared in the same fixed position as if they had when I was talking to them earlier at the fire, as if they were completely transfixed and showed no sign of anger. Even now, when he was trying to strangle me to death, there wasn't one muscle, one facial moment that expressed this. He pressed his fingers closer into my Adam's apple. I could feel the pressure. As my air pipe began to close, I began coughing, and then I could breathe no more. I could feel my lungs trying to expand, but he had a tight grip on my throat. He was fighting the pressure, and I could feel myself slowly descending, feeling terribly hot and foreboding. My sight became less clear, my eyes twitching as the blood lessened to my muscles. I tried to breathe. I tried, but I could not. My insides began to ache, and in my ears the sound of my heart began to beat louder and louder, slower and slower.